every one of us has a giant inside of us. And the problem is sometimes based on where we are, based on the circumstances, based on the environment that you're in, we suppress the giant. And when you suppress the giant, it's exhausting.
Now, here's your host, Seahawks legend, Ray Roberts.
What is up, fam? Man, it has been a while, man. This is welcome to Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition, brought to you by the Mindful Therapy Group, and I'm your host, Big Ray Roberts. And like I was saying just a few seconds ago, man, it has been a minute since we have been on the mic and recorded another episode. Just been really on the road at the beginning of the year, basically like 3 weeks in a row. Was on the road doing work for Special Olympics North America with the Unified Champion Schools work that I do in our cities around the country. I went from everywhere from San Diego all the way to Connecticut and back, and a couple different places in between. So I just haven't had the chance and the time to sit down and knock out a podcast. I tried to throw out a couple little messages here and there to keep people aware and posted in the groove with what we do and how we do it and what we want to talk about. So like I said, I've been all over the country, man. I've had a chance to, with my work with Special Olympics, to speak to some educators in San Diego, and I spoke with 7 different schools in Connecticut. So I was at a middle school on one day, and then the next 2 days I spoke to 6 different high schools, and mostly they're students who are involved in our Unified Champion Schools program. So students with and without intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities on the same teams, in the same clubs, sharing the same space and leadership and all that. And so I had an opportunity to really spread some messaging and do some really good work, man. It's work that is really close to my heart. My own life stories is connected to it a little bit, and so I'm able to go into these places and speak to some kids and really connect with them in a way that they feel inspired, or that they feel that they're doing things the right way and headed in the right direction. And my overall messaging in all those situations was this idea around the transformational power of inclusion. Our country is fighting with this whole idea around inclusion and the idea that people want to carve out a space for themselves and find a place where they belong so they can be their best selves. And so today I am going to try and attempt to, and it may feel like I'm rambling on a little bit, and I apologize because I have a lot on my mind, but I'm going to try to connect the work that I do with Special Olympics with some of the things about Pete Carroll and his philosophy around building culture and team and individuals and such. And, we are in the aftermath, if you want to call it that, but or the post-Pete era, where Pete is stepping into an advisory role to support Mike McDonald, who is our new head coach as of yesterday. So exciting stuff happening here in Seattle around that. So with the work that I do at Special Olympics, we have this model called Unified Champion Schools. And the idea of it is to use inclusion and to use sports and leadership opportunities and friendship opportunities as a way to drive inclusion. And so you say, well, what does inclusion have to do with mental health? Well, it has a lot to do with mental health, because when you decide to include someone, you are saying, come fully as you are. Come fully as the person that you are, with all of your strengths and your weaknesses and your successes and your failures and your peaks and your valleys. Bring all of that to the table, and we have a place for you to belong. That is what inclusion is. That is the work that we try to do in our schools all over the country. And right now we're in our overall programming is in about 10,000 schools around the country. And then the work I do specifically for our city schools, we're probably in about 3,000 schools around the country. And we're trying to increase that number every single day. But the cool thing about when you choose to include people, you're giving people life, and in return, you're receiving life. When you make a space and you create intentional, purposeful, safe space for someone to come in and be fully who they are, you give them an opportunity to be successful at life. You give them an opportunity to take on a sport and play a sport. You give them an opportunity to have a voice. And all of that speaks to our mental health. And so what I'd like to try to do is use that as this backdrop of how some of the messaging that Pete used in his press conference speaks to the same thing, and also speaks to this idea around mental health wellness. Because when we're able to be ourselves, when we're able to find our people and our place where we belong, that's where people thrive. That is where people thrive. Like I said, with the educators I was speaking to in San Diego, man, our teachers are working really hard to create space for everyone to come to school and have something to do, come to school and be able to succeed and have friends and all of that. And sometimes they get caught up in the doldrums of the work. And so then you forget what the outcomes are. And so my messaging to them was that, man, through all the times you're getting ghosted by parents or other administrators or your principal, through all the times you're filling out the paperwork and having to do all of that, all the times you're trying to recruit students to be part of the club, man, you can get worn down. But if you keep your eye on the prize, man, the outcomes are tremendous, because you are giving people a place to thrive. You are giving them a place where they can be accepted as they are, as who they are, with what they can or cannot do, and they get to be their authentic selves. And so when you can show up as you are, who you are, and be accepted and celebrated, man, it's a place to thrive. And before, I want to play a clip of Pete Carroll speaking to this, but before we get to that, let me do this live read real fast. The Mindful Therapy Group has come along and has been great partners with us and title sponsor of the podcast. I've had a lot of conversations with their leadership and ownership, and it's just been a tremendous partnership for me and a good connection for friendship. But the Mindful Therapy Group, based in the Pacific Northwest, is a diverse group of qualified mental health providers offering both in-person and virtual care. Whether it's talk therapy or medication management, you can book your first visit within 1 week. Visit mindfultherapygroup.com to start your journey to better mental health today. So thank you again for Mindful Therapy Group. So back to this idea of finding your place to be authentically who you are. During Pete's post exit, I guess you want to call it, press conference, he kind of speaks to that a little bit. And so I want to see if we can just play that clip right about now.
If you cared for people deeply and you loved them for who they were and tried to find the extraordinary uniqueness that made them them, and celebrate that, and not try to make them something that they're not, and not to try to expect them to be something other than that, but try to see if we can capture that extraordinary uniqueness that they had, and celebrate that with them, let's see what happens. Well, at SC, we killed it. And we came up here, and overall, we've been successful for a long time. I didn't think any way that this would happen like this. I didn't have that vision. But I'm grateful for it, because what we have here, we have an extraordinary culture. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about this clip, and, when Pete Carroll, I was reminded this morning just by some things I saw on social media. But when Pete Carroll first came to Seattle, a lot of people doubted his philosophy. A lot of people thought it was all rah-rah, that it was just kind of smoke and mirrors, that it didn't have any depth to it. And I can remember being, on a radio interview and really defending his approach and how and why it would work here. And I want to tell just a little story that kind of speaks to the foundation of this methodology and this process of Pete. And so in 1992, I was playing with the Seahawks and my rookie year, and I started the season off, I was struggling a little bit. First 6 games, I was struggling. Just couldn't really find my footing. Didn't feel like I was prepared. Started doubting myself, questioning myself. If I had one bad play, I was going to have 6 or 7 bad plays in a row after that. And then I'm going to go home, beat myself up, be mad at myself, all these different kinds of things. And so the Seahawks, I don't know how they found him, but they introduced me to this dude named Richard Diana. And the interesting thing about Richard Diana is that Pete also met Richard Diana in 1999 when he worked with the Patriots. And I think this is where a lot of the basis of Pete's methodology comes from. So Richard had developed this process called knowing awareness. And in it, he does this evaluation. I sat with him for a full day. He asked me a ton of questions. I answered a ton of questions. He did this thing where he held my arm out to the side and felt my pulse, and he would ask me a question and push down on my arm. Sometimes based on my answer, my arm was weak, and sometimes based on my answer, I was stronger. Whether I looked at my arm, looked away, looked down, looked up, all these different kinds of things. And at the end, he wrote like this 8-10-page report about how I function and how I think and all these different kinds of things. And so there's 2 pieces to it. One is that you're either operating in your original state, where if you think about it as an engine, you're working on all cylinders. Everything is working. You got the right amount of oil, the right amount of gas, like the spark plugs. Everything is working the way it's supposed to work. And so the car runs efficiently, it's fast, it's quick. It does all the things that the car is designed to do. When you're working in your learned state, then you go to a place where things aren't working on all cylinders. Maybe you put in diesel gas when you're supposed to have unleaded gas. Maybe you're running on 2-ball tires, or maybe the windshield is cracked and you can't see out the front. So something has kind of created a chink in the system. And for me, as an example, when I'm operating in my original state, I'm a dude that needs to gather information. If I have all the information, if I have the appropriate amount of information, not all the information, but if I have enough of the information, it's easy for me to be really spontaneous in the moment. So there were times during my playing career, my rookie year especially, where I would be in the huddle. I could hear the music in the stadium. I could smell the food that was being cooked in the stadium. I might be in the huddle playing the air guitar or the air drums or dancing or whatever, joking. And a lot of coaches thought that I wasn't ready. But that was the point when I was the most ready, because the fact that I could be spontaneous in the moment, that I can see and feel and experience all those things in a moment, meant that I was ready. It meant that I had the information that I needed, that I can ebb and flow with whatever's going to come. When I was in my learned state, man, it was really tough. When I was in my learned state, Howard Mudd, who was our offensive line coach, who went through all of this with me so he could understand the different cues and the different triggers. When I was in my learned state, my body got really stiff. Every single thing I did was either life or death. It was black or white. I either did it or I didn't do it. It was no in between. My footwork got terrible. My hand placement was terrible. Like if someone knocked one hand down, you might as well just throw me to the ground, because my whole body would just shut down. And so in order to understand this, like we did a lot of training and then a lot of conversation on how do you get from your learned state back to your original state. And to me, you can say, how do you get from, in Pete's language, how do you get from this place of not knowing your authentic self to getting to your authentic self? So if you say your original state is the same as your authentic self, then that is the same language that Pete is speaking. Because a good example of that, and here's two examples. One game, you guys know, I've told all the stories about fighting in games and getting kicked out of games, and Howard Mudd could see it building. He could see that I was getting to this place where I was going to let the simplest thing get to me in a way that I was going to punch somebody in the face, get a penalty, get thrown out the game, whatever it was. And he had this whistle that you can hear the whistle over 100,000 people. And he would whistle at me, and then he would motion like he was playing the guitar. And that was a cue to me to hear the music. So that if I hear the music, that was a cue to like, oh, I can smell the food. Oh, I can do the air guitar. Oh, I can play the drums. I can tell jokes. And that was my cue to get me back to my original state. So if you had enough cameras, you'd have found times on the sideline where you're going like, why is Howard Mudd playing the air guitar? And he was playing the air guitar to get me back to my original state. If you fast forward that to at some point during this season, Geno, there's a clip of Geno being really irritated and frustrated with the officials. And he was walking towards the Seattle Seahawks sideline. I think it was a home game. And he was arguing with the officials. And then Pete stepped out onto the field and got Geno's attention and then just kind of rubbed his gut a little bit. And that was a cue to Geno to reset himself, to get himself back to that original state. I promise you that was a technique that he learned, that Pete learned through this work with Richard Diana. And so a couple people around the country, other media folks saw it, took it and ran with it. Oh man, this is what coaching is all about, and all this other kind of stuff. And but that was nothing new to me. I had seen that since 1992, and I knew exactly where that was coming from because I had been the recipient of the same type of resetting trigger to get me out of this learned state of mindset that I would have been in, where everything is black or white, life or death, and back to this spontaneous, I have all the information thing. And so one of the other things that I learned through this process was it didn't matter whether it was a good play, a bad play, or indifferent. On my way back to the huddle, I'd say three things to myself. I would say I'm prepared, I'm talented enough, now trust it. And then that would help me reset. So I would, whatever the play was before, I got rid of it, and I was back to this place. And so you go like, man, well, that's a mindset thing, and that's a motivation thing. Man, that's a mental health thing. That is a mental health and wellness thing in the moment in a game. It's not like your mental health all of a sudden disappears during competition. It's also there because what will happen is, man, I would have really bad games. I would go home and sit in the hot tub and honest to God, I'd fall asleep drinking vodka or something in the hot tub because I was just beaten. Like, I'm this first-round draft pick, 10th pick in the draft. I'm coming here. Our team is terrible. We're not winning football games, and 60,000 people in the Kingdom are looking at me. And so that will impact your mental health greatly. And so I wanted to tell the story just so that I could I think this is the basis of where a lot of Pete's methodology comes from, this idea of knowing awareness. And so I still have my report that Richard wrote up for me, and Richard passed away a few years ago. I do remember telling Pete, like, hey, man, I think we have a mutual friend in common, and I mentioned Richard Diana, and then we talked for the next hour just about this whole knowing awareness thing. And it's a powerful, powerful tool that has worked out in my life. And so I've said earlier that this idea around the work that I do and with the young people that are trying to show up as who they are, and then also wanting to be celebrated for who they are, and how that speaks to mental health, but how that is also tied to how Pete kind of crafted his career and his coaching methodology around that, because he understands it. He understands that if you can get a person, if you can celebrate a person for who they are, for what they bring to the table, if you can accept their flaws. I mean, think about trying to manage the Legion of Boom. And we've talked about them several times on this show. We talked to KJ Wright about it, how did KJ find and hold on to who he was in the middle of all of that. But you had Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Brandon Browner, Thurman, like all these dudes that are totally 1,000% different. Not even opposite of each other, but just totally different dudes, different skill sets, different personalities, different ways of approaching the world, different ways of communicating to the world, different ways of playing the game. And somehow he was able to have every single one of those dudes feel as if what it is that they do and how they bring it and the way they live and whatever their background is, he found a way for them to find their people. And their people were each other. And then they were able to show up as authentically as they possibly could. And sometimes it rubbed people the wrong way. Sometimes Pete was being accused of not having control and having too much of a player coach and just letting people do and say what they wanted. But they were missing the point. If that's what they saw, they were missing the point that Pete was creating a culture and a place for people to show up in a safe place to exercise who they are, to work out how they fit in the world, to work out how they fit into a place, to find their role the way they do it, and then have that be celebrated in a way that they, as a group, as an individual, those dudes were all successful, which then elevated the whole group to be successful, to be one of the greatest defensive back groups in the history of our league. So think about that. All of the pushback that Pete was getting when he first came here about all the rah-rah stuff, and he's not hard on the players, and he lets them do whatever he wants to do. Pete always had this one rule, which was protect the team. And so if you're able to create boundaries and within those boundaries allow people to be free within those boundaries, that is the epitome of freedom. That is the epitome. Most people think that freedom is being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. But without boundaries, man, that is super destructive. And so Pete created this boundary that allowed these dudes to be their individual, authentic selves. And then he celebrated that in a way that those dudes can show up as their best selves and play some really good football. That's exactly the same thing that we try to do with Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools. We try to create safe spaces within our schools and within our communities for our athletes and everyone that's involved, whether you have intellectual and developmental disabilities or not. If you're in our program and your school and community is working our strategy, we are trying to do what Pete Carroll did here for 14 years, which is allow people a safe place, allow people the opportunity to work out who they are and how they want to show up in the world, and not be judged for it, but to be celebrated for what they bring to the table, to be able to be their authentic selves. For instance, for me, playing in the NFL, like a lot of people they just saw this big 6'6", 315, 20, sometimes 30 pounds dude, and they just thought rough, tough, like scary kind of a guy. But man, if you've ever met me off the field, I'm the most approachable dude in the history of the world. Like I'm not up for fighting. I'm not up for any of the kind of nonsense, any of that kind of stuff. I try to meet and greet people and talk to everybody. Don't sit down next to me if you don't want to talk, because I am going to create a conversation somehow, some way, because that's just kind of who I am. But sometimes I wasn't allowed, or I didn't feel allowed or safe enough to be that part of me, because I had to always be who I thought people wanted me to be. And anytime you're operating in that space, that is an impact on your mental health. There's a book that I read called The Promises of Giants. And it talks about every one of us has a giant inside of us. And the problem is sometimes, based on where we are, based on the circumstances, based on the environment that you're in, we suppress the giant. And when you suppress the giant, it's exhausting. And it's also creates stress and anxiety and depression, because you're not been allowed to be who you are. So then that becomes a mental health thing. And in this book, he tells a story of this one lady who lived in a tougher area of London, but she worked in like a really high-end, top-end, successful business firm. And he was talking to her one day, and as she started talking, her, I guess, dialect changed. And he looked at her and was like, wow, like, what was that? And she goes, well, if I talk like the people that talk from the area I'm from, if I talk like that here in the office, I'm probably not going to be respected. I'm going to lose opportunities and all these different kind of things. So when I close the door behind me and I leave and I'm on my way to work every day, I make sure that I change my dialect so I sound more like the people in the office, because I don't want to be disrespected, and I don't want to be lose opportunities because they think less of me. So for 8 hours a day, this lady had to pretend to be something other than herself. This lady had to hide her authentic self. So there's no way that this lady was doing her best work. There's no way that this lady was excited about coming to work. There's no way that this lady wasn't going home exhausted, stressed, feeling full of anxiety because she's afraid if someone finds out something's going to happen. All of that speaks to mental health and wellness. So mental health and wellness isn't just about responding to trauma. Mental health and wellness isn't just about bad things that have that you've encountered and engaged in your life. All of those things impact your mental health and wellness. I could imagine that this lady was going home feeling a little bit overwhelmed, feeling underappreciated, feeling unheard and unseen, all these different things, because she had to be a shell of herself when she got to work. All of those types of things impact your mental health. And the thing that's really cool is that Pete created a culture here, and I guess he built it at USC, which he talks about in his press conference. But he built a culture here where people could come as they are, understand what they've been asked to do, understand what the boundaries are, and then truly work it out to where they can be truly authentic to who they are. And he speaks about this a little bit when he talks about this idea of being the essence of who you are.
To me, the essence of being as good as you can be is you got to figure out who you are. And you got to figure out that in a relentless effort to try and get clear about what's important to you, what uncompromising principles do you stand by, what makes you who you are, so that if you don't go through that process, you don't do the self-discovery, then you don't have an opportunity to be your best, because you don't know who you are yet. And so it's really hard for our young guys because they're just figuring it out. But as they come through our time, the time they get 25, 26, we see the development. But for anybody, you have to understand what kind of player you are, you understand what kind of coach you are, you understand what kind of person you are, what kind of dad you are, and all the way down the line, to maximize your authenticity and being connected to that true essence of who you are. That's what's crucial. Without that, you're going to be sometimes and you're going to be sometimes. That's why, people don't. It's hard to be consistently successful because people don't even know how they got there. A lot of times, it just happens kind of along the way. Circumstances come together and all. So that's to me the essence of it. That's how I understand it.
Man, I just want to first of all, this idea of Pete saying, if you don't know the essence of who you are, then it's hard to be successful, and then you are successful and you have no idea how you got there, and so then there's inconsistency in that. And it reminds me of the quote that if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. So it's the same as what Pete is saying right here. If you don't know who you are, any path will get you there. And you'll be like a feather in the wind. You'll land wherever you land. But if you're in a place, which is very few places, especially in the workforce or in our lives, very few places give us a chance to work out who we are. Very few places are willing to give us the time that it needs sometimes to work out who we are and find out all those different things that Pete talked about so that we can be in a position to flourish. So that whatever it is, whether it's in your friendships or on the football field or in relationships or in your school or your community, man, if you know who you are, if you know the things you're willing to accept and the things you're willing not to accept. If you're willing to set boundaries, even if it makes other people uncomfortable or maybe they don't like it, if you know who you are, the essence of who you are, man, your chances of being successful at whatever you do is going to be great because you're going into that thing knowing exactly who you are, how you fit in, and how it's going to work out in that situation. And knowing who you are, knowing the essence of who you are, knowing your authentic self is mental health and wellness. Because when you don't know those things, when you're trying to figure those things out and you don't feel like you can fully be who you are and the way you want to be, man, it brings on the stress, it brings on the anxiety, it brings on the panic, it brings on the worry, it brings on the doubt, it brings on this idea that you don't have purpose, all of those things. And I will tell you firsthand that those are things that I dealt with. When I left the NFL, I did not know who I was outside of a football field. I thought I was the smartest dude in the room everywhere I went. I graduated from University of Virginia. I was an academic All-American at one point. I was a smart dude. I was a dude that a lot of guys turned to for help and guidance and things like that in the locker room. I was a team captain on every team I've ever played on. All those different kinds of things. So within that space, I knew exactly who I was. But the minute I retired, man, I had no idea. I had no idea who Ray Roberts was. I had no idea how to show up in the world as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a citizen in the community. Like I just didn't know how to show up, and so I laid on the couch a lot. I stayed in the bed a lot. I covered my head with the pillow all the time. I turned off all the lights and made the room as dark as I could, so it was dark 24/7. Because at the core of it is this identity that I thought was me had died, and then I had to grieve that somehow. I had to grieve that loss and then accept who I was without it. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who the essence of me was without football. And Pete is saying that, man, this is what, to him, that's where the magic is. And to me, just to be off topic a little bit, that's the difference to me between a coach and a leader of men. Sometimes we always want to say, hey, this coach is, because the coach is a coach, he's the leader. Or because the quarterback is a quarterback, he's the leader. Or because your boss is the dude that is the dude or the lady that hired you, that they're the leader. Or that the person who owns the business is the leader. But that's authority. And leadership and authority are two totally different things. And because authority is like you have to do it because they tell you to do it. They're writing the checks. They're signing the checks. You report to them. You have to do it. Doesn't mean that they're gonna lead you anywhere, that you're willing to follow them. It just means that you're responding to the authority. You can have the lowest person on the pay grade be the greatest leader in the room. That's the person that people want to be led by. Those are the people that people want to follow. Authority and leadership and coaching, three totally different things. When people say that a guy or lady is a leader of men or women, the first thing I look at is, well, how are they developing the men or women? Because leadership isn't about the leader; it's about the people you're leading. That's what it's all about. And Pete, to me, coaches are concerned about coaching. What am I going to get out of this person as a player? Are they going to run fast, catch the football, tackle, throw the football, block, all those? How can I get them to do that the best? A leader of people, in this case, a leader of men, is more concerned about the authenticity of a person, is more concerned about the essence of a person, how they show up in the world. Because if they are showing up in the world in a way that they feel good about themselves and that they feel that who they are is been accepted, they're going to show up at the football field and football practice on game day much better than if they didn't have those things. And a lot of times, to me, that's where coaches miss. So, I don't get caught up in the schemes and things that people run because there's 1,000 of them and it changes all the time. But culture doesn't change. The essence of a person, the authenticity of a person don't change. And so when you take time to turn your attention to those types of things, man, that really gets my attention. And it also, this idea that Pete talks about finding the essence of a person and celebrating it, or the authenticity of a person and celebrating it. It reminds me of a poem that I first heard in the movie Coach Carter, where he has the basketball team locked in the gymnasium, and they're having to do their work, and one of the kids that had been kicked off the team comes back to the team and has this epiphany, I guess it is, and he quoted this poem, and it's a little bit long, but I want to say it all just so you can get the essence of it all. But it's the title of the poem is Our Deepest Fear, and it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your plan small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And this is a line I think that speaks a lot to what Pete says. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And so to me, that last part, when we let our own light shine, first of all, you have to be in an environment, in a culture that is allowing you to let your light shine, not in one that's dictating the light that you're shining. And that's the difference with Pete. Pete didn't come here and say, hey, here's this light, and I'm going to give it to you, and I want you to make that light shine. Pete said, here you are, and here's you are the light. And I want to celebrate and amplify and give more wattage to your light and let that shine. And if that shines, you're going to be successful. And then by me letting you let your light shine, it's going to liberate or give other people the freedom to let their light shine. And when you have enough people shining lights and encouraging other people to shine lights and motivating other people, empowering other people to do the same, one of all, you're going to have, no matter how turbulent or how calm the culture is, you're going to have people that are showing up and designed to be successful. You're going to have people that are showing up with a mindset and a mental wellness that is going to allow your team, your corporation, your school, your community, your family, your relationships, it's going to allow them to be successful. And that does not change. Like I said, the schemes change. The age of the coach changes. Whether it's an offensive coach, a defensive coach, whatever it is, all that stuff kind of comes and goes. There's been a ton of different systems throughout the league. But the thing that drives success is culture. And if you don't have a culture that is accepting and not saying that you have to accept bad things, but if you don't have a culture that allows for people to be authentically who they are and be the essence of who they are, then you're going to have one that struggles because the individual is going to be struggling. The individual is going to show up at work going like, man, like this is who I am, but man, I can't be that dude today. I got to be this guy. And then maybe that's going to carry on to the field. And then maybe they're not playing as well as they should play. Maybe they don't understand the defense. Maybe their skill hasn't been used the right way because they're showing up as something less than who they are. And then that's also going to show up off the field because now you're going back home, you're going back to your community, you're back in your relationships, and you have all this doubt and stress and anxiety and maybe even some depression on top of that because you're not allowed to be who you are. You're not allowed to express yourself authentically. You're not allowed to let your light shine. You're shining the light that someone gave you. And so that's going to create mental health issues. Mental health issues aren't just, people going in, depression because of some trauma that has happened to them. Everything that we do has an impact on our mental health. It's either moving the needle in a positive way or it's moving the needle in a negative way. That's why this mental health thing is so important for everyone. whether you're in the middle school or elementary schools that I was in Connecticut, or if you're the teachers and administrators and community leaders that I spoke to in San Diego, and everybody in between. The mental health, this idea around mental health is so looked at as something soft or negative that it baffles me. I just had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and they were saying that they had been into therapy for 6 months or something, and they didn't feel like things were getting better. And man, I'm just gonna give up altogether and keep it moving. I said, well, what if you had a cold, and you had a cold for 6 months, and you're taking the medication, and it's not quite getting better? Are you gonna just stop taking the medication? What if you broke your leg, and it takes a year to heal? But after 6 months, it's not healing like you wanted to heal. Are you going to take the cast off and just cut your leg off? No. You're going to go like, hey, what do I need to do to get the healing that I need? Mental health is the same approach. Mental health is health care. Mental health and wellness is the same as health care. It's the same as going to the gym. It's the same as trying to lose weight. It's the same as trying to get over whatever illness that you have. It is an issue in our life that needs to be attended to and provided the same attention as all these other things in our lives. And I freaking celebrate Pete Carroll for taking this unorthodox approach to it that at first people didn't quite understand. Like I said, when he first came, I can remember being on the radio and host was joking about being this rah-rah guy, and how the rah-rah thing wasn't going to work with these grown men and professional athletes and things. And I said, man, I think you're missing it. I think you're missing the mark. I think dudes are going to want to love to play for this guy. I remember saying those words exactly the week Pete Carroll got hired, and I was on one of the radio shows here in Seattle, and I said, Pete, these players are going to want to play for this dude. And not only have they wanted to play for him, look at all the guys that come back. And they're not coming back just based on the success they had on the field. They're coming back because of the success they had as people. They're coming back because of the success they had with Pete of finding out who they are and showing up as authentically as they possibly could. They're coming back because he didn't shut any of that down. They're coming back because he found a way to celebrate a Richard Sherman and a Russell Wilson. He found a way to celebrate a Cam Chancellor and a Marshawn Lynch. like just those four personalities alone, man, if I had 4 kids with all those different personalities, I think I'd probably divorce them. It'd be tough to deal with. It'd be hard. But Pete found a way to bring all of them into the fold, to celebrate all the uniqueness. That's what I love. He used the word uniqueness. All the uniqueness of who they are. He found a way for them to own that, understand it, and then he celebrated that. And to me, that is a leader of men, and that is the essence of what mental health and wellness is. It allows for those individuals to show up as themselves, fully, wholly, with all the peaks and valleys, all the flaws, all the weirdness, if you want to call it, the craziness, the calmness, whatever it is, the way you talk, the way you live, the way you play, all those different kinds of things. He said, come as you are. And then let's celebrate that and go win some football games. So Pete, yes, a different dude. To me, he's one of one. There are people that have tried to maybe do things similar. There's people that do it their way. Bill Belichick had a different way that he did it. Man, I prefer Pete's way of doing it. They both were successful, so you take your choice. But, man, I am a big fan of Pete Carroll's. Will always be a big fan of Pete Carroll's. Just because he's moving on to something new doesn't mean that his philosophy and his approach does not work. Maybe he was here 14 years, and sometimes you got to change for the sake of changing to get new energy and new juice and all that kind of stuff and get the edge back and all that. But it doesn't mean that his approach to life, which is also his approach to coaching, does not work, because I see it work every single day when I'm in and out of all the schools that I go to all across the country. And I've been in schools from Florida to Connecticut to North Carolina to Arizona to New York City to Chicago to L.A., Seattle, all the places in between, Tennessee. I've been to schools all over our country, and this methodology, very similar to what we're trying to create in our Unified Champion Schools strategy, works because it allows people to show up fully as themselves and be successful doing it. So I want to thank you guys again for listening. And remember our 3 things. It's okay to not be okay. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, reach out to your to your medical provider for guidance. And number 3, if you need help and you ask for help, you're operating from a position of power. And again, thank you for tuning in. Peace. And I'm out.